This time it's 5 classic middleweight dirt bikes of the 1970s. It has to be said that not everybody wants the biggest, baddest dirt bike every time they go out. Sometimes you want something that's easily controllable, more manageable, and of course cheaper to buy. And so here are 5 classic middleweight dirt bikes. The Kawasaki K175. Kawasaki produced a broad range of trail bikes during the 1970s, from humble 50s all the way up to mighty 500s. Perhaps one of their best remembered, however, is the K175. Now, the K175 was introduced in 1976 and was a direct descendant of the earlier 175 F series that Kawasaki had been producing since the F1 had appeared way back in 1966. The engine was of course an air-cooled two-stroke, but had rotary valve induction and had slightly over square dimensions of 61 by 58.8. And of course there was Superlube automatic oiling, which pumped oil directly into the crankcase rather than into the flow of gas, rather like other two-strokes did at the time. There was an excellent 26mm Makuna carburetor fitted, and the bike used magneto ignition, which was very reliable. Although the K was actually introduced in 1976, it was based around earlier machines, and Kawasaki would claim a very healthy 21 horsepower at 7,500 RPM for the motor, but earlier tests had actually shown around 15 horsepower at the back wheel on the dyno. But this is still a pretty healthy figure for a 175 after all, and in fact in real terms was pretty close to what you were getting from a lot of the 4-stroke in particular 250s, and even Kawasaki's own larger K250 only outperformed the engine slightly, and that bike was quite a bit heavier. And this is where the little 175 really shone. The bike weighed in at around 250 pounds or 115 kilos, so it was very light and very nimble. If you got it stuck somewhere, it was easy to extract the thing. And of course the lightweight also meant that the bike made the very best of the performance that was available, so acceleration was actually very good for such a small bike. So nimble, good acceleration, easy to handle, and easy to pull out of a pothole. And it was reliable too. There's a lot to love about the KE. So overall you have to say, the K175, do you really need to buy anything bigger? And I suspect that if you're a guy in the 1970s looking for a trail bike, that's very much the question you'd be asking yourself. The Yamaha DT175 and 250 models. For the 1970s, Yamaha were very known for their off-road bikes, but not everybody wanted something like this 360. Some people just wanted something a bit more accessible. And with that market very much in mind, in 1971 Yamaha introduced the DT250 and its smaller 175 stablemate. And just like the Kawasaki before, the bike was an evolution of a previous model, in this case the 1968 DT1. The engine of course was a single cylinder air-cooled two-stroke of either 246 or 171 cc's, with the 250 having bore and stroke dimensions of 70 by 64 and the 175 having dimensions of 66 by 50. Yamaha would claim a peak of 23 horsepower at 6,000 RPM for the 250 and 16.3 at 7,000 horsepower for the 175. The bikes were broadly of course very much the same, although the 175 had a 6-speed gearbox compared to the 250's 5-speeder. As you would hope, both bikes were commendably light, adding to the agility and the acceleration, and in fact the 175 was even lighter than the Kawasaki before it, making for a very good all-round package. The Mako 250 Enduro. German company Mako had started out producing cars, but had switched post-war to producing these very nice scooters, before later moving on to off-roaders. And the Enduro machine, the GS250, would endure a very long production run between 1964 and 1979. However, given Mako's pioneering attitude towards the development of their machines, you can rest assured that the bike in 1979 was a very different beast from that first introduced in '64. And these later 70s machines would of course enjoy the use of the long travel suspension system that Mako had pioneered. The engine used was a fairly standard single-cylinder air-cooled, piston-ported two-stroke unit that in base form only claimed around 17 horsepower, although it could be tuned and was often tuned to give quite a bit more. and compression even at standard trim was an eye-watering 15.5 to 1. So whatever horsepower your particular version was actually getting was then fed through a 5-speed gearbox to the 18-inch rear wheel. But it's when you begin to look at this machine dimensionally you realise what a really purposeful bit of kit this is. The seat height is 960mm, hopefully it sinks down quite a bit when you put your butt on it, and there's a ground clearance of 384mm too. Factor in its light weight of 109 kilos and you've got yourself a serious bit of kit indeed. The Honda CR250 Elsinore. Now I use the Elsinore name here because it's instantly recognisable to American viewers, although for us Brits it's a name that doesn't tend to associate with the CR, we often just call it the CR. Although of course anybody that's seen on any Sunday will instantly make the link to the Elsinore Grand Prix, which is very much shown in the movie. Now with a few notable exceptions, Honda is essentially a 4-stroke manufacturer, both for production bikes and in their competition TT road races. However, when they wanted to go off-road, they knew they would need to develop a 2-stroke. So in 1973 they introduced the Elsinore with its 247.8cc single-cylinder air-cooled 2-stroke unit. The engine ran slightly over square dimensions of 70 by 64.4 and had a 5-speed transmission. The bike was an instant sales success, particularly in the US, and would set the standard for Hondas for many years to come. Canam MX3 Canadian-based manufacturer Canam began to produce motocross bikes of 175 and 125cc capacities in 1973, but in 1974 they would introduce their first 250, with an updated version, the MX3, arriving in 1976. And although a great deal of work had been done to improve the suspension setup on the previous model, the MX3 became known as the Black Widow because of its ill handling. This is mainly due to a rather flimsy frame designed for a smaller bike, trying to contain a 35 horsepower monster of an engine. And in fact Jeff Smith, former motocross world champion and Canam's development rider, tried the bike out and declared it frankly unrideable. Thankfully by the end of the 70s and the arrival of the MX6 model, Canam had tamed the woeful handling beast, and Canam would finally have a competent chassis to cope with its excellent motor. However, in 1982 production was moved to the UK and was taken over by Armstrong CCM, bringing to an end Canadian manufacture. What collections of bikes would you like to see us do a video on? Maybe you've got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.